and we were trying to explain what was going on. Our charges are kidnapping first degree, criminal sexual conduct first degree, and possession of meth with intent to distribute on his second offense. Our victim is, of course, recovering now, and we're trying to make sure that we do everything for her and her family. Her family's on the way. Our victim was transported to hospital last night and released after medical protocols and crime scene protocols that they're used there. The victim is resting at this moment, and we'll meet her family later today, and she simply needed to rest before we could talk with her today, before we did what we had to talk her today. Let me give you a brief timeline of what's going on and what happened. And so Mr. Uri engaged in conversation with this adult female from Canada over the past few months, a few weeks. Adult female from Canada, Alberta, Canada, via the internet and social media apps for about 2 months prior to the incident happened last night when we got involved. He presented himself to a photographer, a professional photographer, and he was in the need of hiring a model. He advised the model that be paid several thousands of dollars to come down here and do modeling that he needed someone for. The conversation involved negotiations back and forth, and they, I guess you would say, and that's when she decided to come down here. Let me stress this, at no time did the victim promise any nudity, any sexual favors or anything like that. It was strictly the modeling jobs that we think about, that we see in our local paper or local sales ads. Last week on May the 18th, the victim flew down from Canada and arrived at the Atlanta airport because there was some problem with Greenville. And so he went and picked her up in Atlanta and brought her back to Pickens County. The plane ticket was actually paid for by our suspect, by the person we've charged, Mr. Uri. She was taken to a local hotel that night and stayed one night before moving to another motel the next night. During that time, she was registered guest at both hotels, and the suspect drove the victim to various locations in Pickens and Anderson County, really telling her that these looking at places for shooting, for photo shoots and backdrops and the whole thing as you're pretending to be a photographer. On the third night, the suspect took the victim back to his residence, and once inside, he immediately used physical force to restrain her and threaten her safety as well as the safety of her family in Canada. She was forced to engage in various sex acts to include bondage, oral sex, and sexual intercourse multiple times over several days. She was allowed to call home over her cell phone, but under the close scrutiny of our suspect. He would also have to see the screen all the time and listen and monitor all the phone calls. As the days passed, the victim was able to send coded messages of distress back to her family, and she was allowed to FaceTime her family, and she used that FaceTime to kind of mouth some warnings and pleas for help during that time. And also it came across as her parents immediately picked up how frightened and nervous she was. The victim, well, of course, after a victim notified them of something was wrong, they notified the Royal County Mounted Police, the Royal Police in Canada, and attempts were made to track the victim's cell phone from there. There were some issues of that starting off first, but we were able to get it done. The Sheriff's Office immediately began to mobilize detectives and our uniformed patrol units, and we started searching for the suspect, his vehicle, and the victim. Remember, a lot of times when we were trying to catch him, he was on the move. They were going different places. But meanwhile, the investigation and tracking technology, the Sheriff's Office confirmed the suspect's identity and the location of his residence. Last night, about 10:30 p.m., deputies surrounded the suspect's residence, and numerous attempts to get him to come to the door failed. And during those moments to follow, though, the deputies heard somebody running inside the house, and all of a sudden they're up on the front porch or deck of this home, and she comes busting out of a glass window. And at that time, our detectives had already, in uniform patrol supervision, had already decided we had enough exigent circumstances to enter the home, but she came out and they went in. So as she came out, heard screams before the victim dove through the glass and actually fell out into the front yard. At that time, we secured her and made sure she was safe while we went in and got the suspect. As we went in the door, we went to the back of the mobile home, our suspect had a knife to his throat, threatened to kill himself, and after commands from our officers, he put down the knife and it eventually surrendered, and he was secured at that time. As a search of residence pursuant to a search warrant issued by the Pickens County Magistrate, we found methamphetamine enough for possession for intent to distribute, and so we added that charge also. And we found additional evidence corroborating the victim's statement that she had been physically tied with restraints. So the evidence was there to start to see what was really going on. The victim was treated overnight at the hospital and has since been released with minor injuries. Our victim advocate was called out last night and has been taking care of her. She's done a great job of attending to this victim. And she's at an undisclosed safe location now, again receiving help and support from us and waiting on her parents to arrive. I believe her grandparents may be coming also, or one's going. The suspect's been charged, as I mentioned before, kidnapping, criminal sexual conduct first degree, and possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine on the second degree. But let me stress this, the case is still under investigation, and we've got a lot of reviewing to do. We're working with the Canadian officials and other officials across between these two entities, and so we're looking at for cell phone records, social apps, all that stuff we'll have to capture and analyze to see if he has done this to other people and to see what else is going on in his life, and again, see what we can do for our victim also. We have numerous questions about this, but this is an ongoing investigation, as you know, just from last night. So we've got a case to build. We have our solicitor's office in conjunction with us here today. So it'll be limited on what we can say, especially as it relates to the part of the case. But we want to give you something to do as far as looking at what we're doing and what has happened so we can get you the information that we could. We just don't want to jeopardize the prosecution at all. One thing I want to hit on, a couple of things, is thank goodness our victim is fine. It's had to be a harrowing experience for her. And I think one of the things to pick up on this that y'all can help with also is we say it over and over and over again about the safety and the not safety, really, on the internet and what can happen. This is a typical example. It's probably seen time and time again, and a lot of times it doesn't turn out as good as it did today. So what we're asking is, you know, after the story, maybe hit some of the things that need to be talked about the internet and what's going on. And it comes down, we can give you tips and figures and everything. It comes down to one thing. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. So do your homework. If you're whether it's buying a car off eBay or Craigslist or going for modeling, do your homework. I think if anybody looked at this, where this person lived on Google Street View, you could tell immediately it's not a professional photographer's place of business. So little things like that, we stress it all the time, and maybe put out the word to parents to stress of what the internet contains and what lies and hoaxes can be behind it. That we're hoping to save a life or save somebody getting out of danger just by stressing that. And that's really the reason we came forward today, is to get that message out. Do the homework. If it's legitimate, it'll show up very easily. But if you get that odd feeling that something's not right, you're probably right because it's wrong. Again, the internet can be used for bad things like he did, but it can also be used to find out what's wrong with just like the situation we've seen today. And I think that's a critical point. Again, as we're still gathering evidence, we would like to ask that limit the questions of what we're doing. But I want to say a couple of things. Our officers last night, between our detectives and our uniform patrol, were tremendous as a team. We had, of course, uniform cars looking out and trying to catch. We even had a Sergeant Porter, who, even as he went home, his shift was over, he was still doing a lot of the social media stuff, trying to get on her app and trace and see, and working with her family to see. So he was at home doing a lot of social media work on his off time while we had units on the road and detectives doing the job on the street and try to find her over a large area because they were moving last night. So I want to thank all the team that's involved in that, from our victim with advocates to uniform patrol to detectives to everybody who pulled all that together for a successful conclusion. And I'm just very proud of what they did. So, and again, that's the main reason we call this conference, is for the education that we can get out of this to other people. So, any questions that we can maybe try to?
I know you talked about social media apps. Are you able to talk about what app was used and that, like, how exactly they met on the internet?
I just reading a report. I don't have it. I don't know if it's the technical name is Family App, but it's an app that her family used, and that's what helped us a lot of the times of her trying to have communication with her through her family.
But I mean, the app that, whatever it was how the suspects found her on the internet. I mean, was it through like Facebook or was it through like some sort of?
I don't know that yet. that detail hadn't come up. We've done a lot of searching, but it's mainly what happened as the movement and trying to track her.
And I think you touched on the date, and I was trying to type too fast, so I may have missed it. But how long was she held?
She's been here since the 18th of this month. But her first time, you know, she was in one hotel one night, one hotel the next night by herself, and then after that was when she was really, I guess she was captive.
Like 5 days, I guess, technically.
The 20th would have been when
yeah.
the ends actually started.
Yeah, 18th and 19th. Yeah.
So it started on the 20th, and then y'all rescued her last night, which would have been the 24th. So about 4 days held. Okay.
How long was it, I guess, when were you all notified about this going on? How long did it take you to determine there was a real threat here?
The call came in from her family yesterday late afternoon. So we're in 3, 4, 5, probably 3 or 4 o'clock range, and then we were trying to get everything to where we could track her and come in and see, you know, when it was all the way till about 10:30 last night.
What was the threat to her apparent as soon as you all were notified, or did you have to look around a bit to determine what might be going on?
Well, at that time they had gone several places around the upstate, and we were tracking on and on. She actually went about 3 counties. They were riding around or going somewhere. I don't know if I had somewhere specific, but we kept tracking through that app with her parents and our sergeant continue on. And so, but when you do that, a lot of times you're a minute or 2 behind. Our time it refreshes, you know, there, especially when he's traveling 50 or 60 miles an hour. So it took us a while to get to him, and then finally we isolated him at the house. And we had people already looking, so about the time that we were sitting on the house and the app came together is when it all matched.
You mentioned that she was being monitored by this man when she, you know, called family or FaceTime. When she was giving her family clues, did she manage to kind of sneak away or kind of do it secretly, and how did she kind of get that across?
I think it's kind of a FaceTime is where she'll be looking and she would silently, when this happens when they were in the truck, so he would have to put some attention on driving, and from what I gather, she would kind of mouth stuff silently to let them know, and they started picking up on it, and so that's what got them alerted.
And then, do we know as far as phone court when that would be?
It's not going to be this afternoon. I would say maybe tomorrow. I think we'll put out something.
Well, typically, again, like we were talking about earlier, that's a decision by the judge. Typically, that'll happen up here inside the jail. They start sometimes at 4 o'clock, depending on the number of inmates that need to be bonded. It could be 15 minutes or it could be an hour and a half before they even get to him.
But you said probably tomorrow.
I think he intends to see him this afternoon, is what I was told earlier today.
Yeah. This afternoon will be brief because due to these charges, he'll have to see another judge on a lot of these. So he'll have an initial hearing on those today, too.
When we think about this, I don't know if it goes so far as to call it sex trafficking, but just thinking about crimes of this nature, people think Pickens County, smaller rural area, can't happen here. Can you just speak to kind of the natures of this crime, where it can happen, just kind of how it's affected you?
That's perfect. I had that same thought earlier today. You know, it's happening in Pickens County, and I guess the way to really say that, if you have internet, it can happen to you, no matter where you are. We're a great county here and very, I think, protected and low crime rate, but still, you never know what can be done. And again, this went over 2 countries and ended up in Pickens, South Carolina, Pickens County, South Carolina. So that's a great point of it can happen to you. Don't think it's never going to happen to you. That's part of the education part we're trying to get out.
Have you had any, or investigators ever had any run-ins with this guy before, or is it something, I or been called to his home before or anything like that?
We haven't pulled the cat on that yet, but his possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine is a second offense, so we at least have the drug charges, and I assume that will be from us. And so at least that's first all we know right now.
Do you think it was all done allegedly by him, or, I mean, could there have been any other people helping him in this whole thing?
Again, we're in the middle of investigation, but right now we're focused on him. Now, that could change at any second, but we're focused on him at this point. And she's going to be a great person when we get finished with her. And she'll give us information on other actors if that happens.
And you mentioned you're investigating, doing your due diligence as always, making sure that there's no other victims out there. I mean, is that a concern at this point, that maybe there could have been someone else out there that was victimized in this way?
Yeah, again, we don't have anything right now, but we may follow up and see if, we have access to his phone. We have a search warrant for his phone. So that usually leads us in many different directions when we see something like this. So. Okay, if that's it, thank you very much.
Appreciate you coming. I'll send the mugshot. You weren't here when I was talking about earlier. I'll send that stuff electronically to the station too.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks so much, appreciate the time.
Appreciate y'all coming. Thank you.